Hey there. Good morning. Good morning. So, today I want to talk about pretend play and a concept called theory of mind. And theory of mind is typically a term you hear when you're talking about autism and autism in children and how that interacts, how that relates to their social interactions and their ability to navigate complex social situations, as well as kind of how their brain works. Theory of mind is a term that's been around for a while, and there's been a lot of research in theory of mind and children. And so I've run across a few of these articles on theory of mind and the connection with pretend play. And as a play therapist, really understanding pretend play is always going to capture my interest. The likelihood it's capturing your interest is pretty darn high, especially when a lot of what I hear from new play therapists that I supervise and that I talk with, and those that attend my play therapy trainings, is how do I know what's going on? I once even heard a court professional, because a play therapist was presenting um, some testimony and talking about what clients were doing, and it was all pretend play based. And the question was, talking about their own child and how what they see in their child. And that doesn't necessarily mean problems, which I thought was a really good point. And I think this is the thing that play therapists we think about all the time is, well, they're playing. How do I know what it is? How do I know that I'm understanding what they're doing in the playroom and making sense of what they're doing, so that I know what they're working through and I can articulate this to their parents and I don't look like a big giant fraud. I'm not making things up in my head, which is always a concern because play therapy is a projective modality. So making sure that it's rooted and grounded in theory and the theory is applied and that dictates how we make sense of things. That's a huge part of our case conceptualization, is recognizing what is going on and making sense of it and using our theoretical play therapy model to conceptualize and then use that information for treatment planning. So when we're talking about pretend play, what exactly are we talking about and how does that relate to play therapy? And what is the connection between play therapy and theory of mind? And this is where research can come in and help us understand things, because part of the competency of play therapy, being a play therapist, is understanding child development, understanding childhood problems that you might see manifest with your clients. How does that um, line up with their developmental stage? And also in the United States here, we use the DSM, Diagnostical and Statistical Manual, for our diagnoses. And although the DSM-5 has done a better job at kind of showing what these different diagnoses look like in children, historically, that's not necessarily something that we've learned. And so understanding theory of mind, which is a developmental process, and how that connects with play therapy, to me is a really important thing to think about. Plus, I find it interesting. Plus, I keep seeing it in the research. So I thought, well, what the heck? I'm going to talk about it. So if you're joining me live today, I would love to know who's here. Please feel free to post your name in the comments. Where are you from? What population do you work with? I'm Kathy Spooner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapy supervisor here in the United States. I have been working with children and adolescents in mental health for a little over 30 years. Prior to that, I worked with children with emotional problems as a special education teacher. So I've essentially been working with children and families since the early 1980s. um, in one capacity or another, working in a lot of different types of mental health settings, residential, intensive outpatient, counseling, public mental health facilities. So I've pretty much worked most places in most types of settings. So go ahead and post your name in the comments. I go live every Wednesday at 7 a.m. Pacific time and talk about all things play therapy. And so I live stream into my Facebook group for child and adolescent therapists using play therapy and expressive arts. And that is called Play and Expressive Arts Therapy Playground. If you're a child and adolescent therapist and you use play therapy, if you're interested in that group, feel free to hop over, and you're on Facebook, feel free to hop over there and join the Facebook group. You do have to answer every question. If you don't answer every question, then you don't get into the group. And that happens all the time. So I like to make sure that people know to answer every single question so that you can get into the group. I also live stream into LinkedIn, YouTube, and then also simultaneously on my Instagram channel. So if you are joining me live, let's see who's here. I'd love to know your understanding of theory of mind and your work with children. Are you using play therapy? What play therapy modality are you using? So let's get started. So first, one last thing. So Instagram doesn't let me use this third-party platform called StreamYard. But if you're in my Facebook group or in LinkedIn or YouTube and you want to make a comment, if you give StreamYard permission, I can see your name. You don't have to give StreamYard permission. It only allows me to see your name. That's pretty much it. I don't know why it is that way. It just is. So, all right. So let's get started. So first and foremost, I've talked about pretend play in a previous live stream episode. So if you're interested in that, you can go back and watch some of the replays. If you're on Instagram, I think if you go into my grid, you can watch some of the replays there. It's probably easiest to watch the replays in my Facebook group, and they're all pinned in the featured section, or in my YouTube. On my YouTube channel, you go onto YouTube, Kathy Spooner, Renewing Hearts Training, and click on the live tab. You have to click the live tab, and then you'll see all my replays. So essentially, what is pretend play? So pretend play really allows children to kind of step into a suspended reality where they can try out different roles, different behaviors, work through different solutions. It's really about using their imagination and creativity and fantasy to act out different situations and experiences, emotions, different problems they're experiencing, and then try and explore and make sense of the world. And this is how children use play to navigate and better understand and grow. And in play therapy, what we have done is we take those therapeutic powers of play and apply them using a theoretical model that dictates how you help children access those therapeutic powers of play. And one of the core competencies for a play therapist is really understanding play dynamics. And to me, this is where pretend play comes in. In pretend play, we're understanding those different play dynamics, we're recognizing themes. Also, if you're interested in this topic, I did talk about this in a whole play dynamics, the core competency of play dynamics. I talked about that in a previous live stream episode. So hop over to my YouTube channel and you can watch that replay. Or if you're in my Facebook group, pop up there to the featured section. So how do we use pretend play in play therapy is we providing that free and protected space for children in that other realm of possibility where complex situations can be worked through and understood using pretend play. And they can explore new and practice new skills. They can work through maybe some challenging, complex social and emotional challenges that they're experiencing, try out new roles. So in children developmentally will, when they're younger, will use pretend play. And then in play therapy, that's one of the ways children access those therapeutic powers of play is through pretend play. So the next thing that I want to talk about is theory of mind. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of theory of mind. So theory of mind, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of really big fancy research terms in the field of theory of mind, and it hurt my head. So, and it's really complex. Like, this is a very complex concept. And I'm going to give you like the girlfriend's guide, your play therapy girlfriend's guide to theory of mind. And then I'll talk a little bit about what the research says and then tie that up with how do we kind of make sense of that and use that as play therapists. Essentially, theory of mind is the capacity to understand other people's mental states, and by ascribing meaning to those mental states and what we kind of surmise is happening, so in their minds. So I'm going to read actually from Wikipedia. I had a really good definition, and I want to read that because I thought it was pretty good. And it says theory of mind refers to the capacity of understanding other people by ascribing mental states to them, that is, surmising what is happening in their mind. This includes the knowledge that others' beliefs, desires, intentions, emotions, and thoughts may be different from one's own. And this is key when you're talking about theory of mind, understanding theory of mind and what it means in terms of this is how I am making sense of and putting meaning to your what I'm observing in you. And do I have the capacity to recognize that it's separate from my own? And I'll talk a little bit about the false belief test. That's one of the big kind of strategies to assess theory of mind capacity. And this is a developmental task. Children developmentally are learning and developing those theory of mind processes. So processing a functional theory of mind is considered crucial for success in everyday human interactions, which is one of the reasons when you think about autism, why this can create such complex mental health challenges, even for these neurotypical children, adolescents, young adults, and adults, trying to figure out how to navigate these complex social interactions when my theory of mind processing is not working at its optimal capacity, and it creates some challenges for me socially and emotionally. So Wikipedia goes on to say theory of mind is a theory because the behavior of others, such as their statements and expressions, is the only thing being observed. Their mind and its contents cannot be observed directly, so the existence and nature of that mind must be inferred. And this is theory of mind, the ability to infer what that is accurately, or at least close to being accurate. So that's essentially theory of mind, and there are different aspects of theory of mind. So it's called factive, which is knowledge attribution, meaning what others know, see, hear, and are aware of. And it's factive because they're directly tied to how you take the world to be. So, so for the false belief test, essentially, so there's different ways of doing it. So let's say I'm the researcher, I have a child with me, and I have a small stuffed animal, and I'm in the room with the child, and I I see that the child sees me put the doll somewhere. But before, so first and foremost, I'm the researcher, the child, I have the toy, and the toy is out, and then another child comes in, and the child one sees where child two saw the toy to be. So maybe it's out like under a box or something. They put it under the box. And then the child two leaves, and the researcher moves the toy to another location and then asks child one, when child two comes back in, where do you think the toy will be? And children who haven't gotten fully developed theory of mind will go with what they see and will ascribe that to what the other child will believe. So child one will say, well, wherever location two was, not really recognizing that child two didn't see the researcher move it to the new location. So when child two comes back in and the researcher asks, well, where's the toy? The likelihood child two is going to say in the previous location, because that's where the child two saw it, is pretty high. So the idea there is that the child isn't able to think about it from child two's point of view and recognize, oh, child two last saw it over here. They're most likely gonna see it over there. And so non-factive belief is this is really kind of where the false belief test comes into play. Factive is really understanding the beliefs, which may or may not be false, and that we can't really represent others' way of knowing or being unless we take it to be false, or recognizing a belief may be false for that person, even though it doesn't line up with us. So there are different aspects, and the researchers are looking at which came first, factive or non-factive, all of those kinds of things. All of that, there's really a whole lot to look at if you're interested in learning more about theory of mind. I don't want to go into it in too much detail because um, that kind of takes us down a rabbit hole. It's a really fascinating rabbit hole, though. And I really want to kind of get to how we can use this in the play therapy process. So, what does research say about pretend play and theory of mind? And in the description for my YouTube channel and LinkedIn and Facebook, I put the two research articles that I was kind of referencing for today. If you're on Instagram and you're interested in the research, just send me a DM. I can give you the author name and the research article, and then if you have the ability, you can look that up. So what does the research say? So the research says that children around the age of 4 or 5 have the capacity to recognize the mental states of others while understanding that those are separate from their own. So what you typically see is around the age, when researchers are doing the theory of mind test, around the age of 4 or 5, the child will be able to recognize in that. So let's go back to that scenario I was using. The child will be able to recognize that child one will be able to recognize that child two, when asked where the toy is located, child two will most likely say the last place they saw it. and be able to recognize that even though I saw the researcher move the toy to a different location, child two didn't observe that change. And so they're probably going to see it where they saw it last. Um, and so, in the discussion of theory mind research community, is whether children have the capacity to recognize the mental states of others much earlier than 4 or 5 years old, like early childhood or even infancy. And the way that they're assessing this capacity is to use research designs that use pretend play. And so, one of the research articles that I referenced for this live stream today was by Julia Wolf. This was published in 2022, and the journal is Synthese. It's Synthese. And the article is called Implications for Pretend Play for Theory of Mind. And so I'm going to read a quote from what Julia Wolf said from this article, because I think it really does give a nice summary of what I'm talking about here, which is Julia Wolf argues that although pretend play itself does not provide evidence of theory of mind, the ability to deal with inconsistent representations evidenced in pretend play is highly relevant to research on theory of mind, especially especially regarding the issue of how knowledge attribution relates to belief attribution. So that's that factive versus non-factive. I will not dispute that children may well be capable of knowledge attribution before the false belief attribution. Excuse me. Before false belief attributions, but I will argue the evidence of children's early pretend play indicates the reason why this is the case. This case is more complex than usually thought. And so essentially, if we go back to what pretend play is the ability for children to kind of step out of reality, step into this place between fantasy and reality, and try out different roles to work through different possibilities. And so using pretend play, and this is the part that I thought was really interesting, researchers are using pretend play with children younger than 4 or 5 and using different types of protocols with pretend play to assess the ability for even infants to recognize the mental states of others. So if you even think about, this is my kind of takeaway, this is where my brain goes. The way that I think about this is it brings me to attachment theory. And one of the things that we know about attachment and neuroscience is that children learn from infancy to begin to recognize facial cues, voice tone, and through those experiences, they're beginning to make meaning of that. And so think about the ability to use pretend play even in very young children to explore theory of mind capacity. And to me, the possibilities of that are kind of unlimited, because think about that with trauma and attachment, early trauma and attachment wounds, and how theory of mind might be impacted by that. Like that neurocircuitry, I wonder what happens with that neurocircuitry. Well, we know from a lot of the research that it does impact the way babies make sense, and in early childhood, even toddlers begin to make sense and adjust, and that becomes their way of believing and thinking, which can influence their ability to see themselves as separate from others, and that others have different beliefs from them. And just because they have the belief doesn't necessarily mean everybody has the belief. I think a prime example we've learned in popular TV shows is my family loved watching Big Bang Theory. And I remember watching this like years and years ago thinking, I think Sheldon's character has autism. Um, and I think as the show went on, we kind of realized that Sheldon's character did have a pretty significant uh, was autistic, which because we saw that his ability to really think things through from another person's point of view, like his way was, of course, the way everybody believed. And it didn't make sense to him that somebody could have a different opinion than him. So, this is all theory of mind concepts and theory. And so I think he was a really good example. And so the ability for researchers to assess that, even in young children, and do more research using pretend play, to me, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this down the road and how they're using these different types of research designs to explore a variety of things with children. And so that brings us to, as play therapists, like that's all well and good, Kathy Spooner, about what the heck am I going to do with this information, right? So as a play therapist, how do you make sense of this, or how can you use this information other than it's just really interesting to see? And I honestly think we'll be seeing more things with this. And so think about this on a practical level. And this is me. I didn't get this from the research. This is kind of the way my mind works and where my mind jumps to. So I'm reading these articles and I'm thinking, holy cow, this is really interesting, because the use of pretend, like children use pretend play to work things through and to explore complex issues. This is just part of their development. And I always like to tell the story of one of my sons when he was really little. He's really more of an introvert. He's a big introvert, man. He's an adult now. But when he was really, really little, my husband and I never knew what was going on because he wasn't a talker. And to get him to talk was like pulling teeth out of his head. He just did not talk. He didn't want to talk about anything. It was kind of the way his brain worked. He goes to his different drummer. But one day, I remember when he was little, this is like preschool age, and he was in preschool. And it was after preschool, and I was walking by his room, and I heard his little voice talking, and I'm thinking, well, that's interesting because he's not really a talker, but I hear him having this whole conversation. And so, being the good mother and good play therapist that I am, I hid outside his door because I wanted to see what was going on. And so I didn't want him to see me because I knew if he did that I wouldn't be able to know what he was doing. And I was fascinated. I was just fascinated with what he was doing. And so what I observed was that he had this imaginary friend called Tigger, Winnie the Pooh. He liked Winnie the Pooh. And so I had this imaginary friend, Tigger, and he was having a whole conversation with Tigger. And as I was listening, what I realized was he was working out the social interactions at school, all the little preschool things, all those complex preschool social emotional things that go on. He was using pretend play to figure that out and kind of navigate it. And to me, that just kind of made the magic, realizing actually children do. And as play therapists, I'll finish my sentence. Children really do use that pretend play process to work through and make sense and problem solve and do all those developmental tasks to make sense of their world and figure out how to navigate this world that they're living in. And so as play therapists, we provide this free and protected space in the playroom, depending on your theoretical model. And this is a thing we talk about all the time. So I'll talk a little bit at the end about Play Therapy Academy if you're interested in Play Therapy Academy and some of the courses that I have. But in Play Therapy Academy, we have 2 consultation groups a month, and there's some other trainings in there to support your learning journey. And during our play therapy consultation groups, one of the things we're doing is case consultations, showing video. We're recognizing what is going on in the playroom through the play process. That's a core skill that we need to develop as play therapists. And especially when you're new in play therapy, you feel overwhelmed. You don't know what's going on. It doesn't make any sense. People ask you to explain what their child is doing. If you've ever had to testify or deal with, attorneys, you're having to explain play therapy, and that can feel overwhelming, and you can feel like a big giant fraud and a big imposter, and it can be a little frustrating and scary. And so, in my mind, one of the things that we do in Play Therapy Academy, and this is a skill as a play therapist that you're learning how to develop. You're learning how to develop the ability to create that free and protected space where children can access those therapeutic powers of play for healing using a specific theoretical model. Or maybe you've gotten to the point where you're using more of an integrated model, but you definitely want to use a play therapy theoretical model, because your theoretical model identifies and defines how you make sense of the problem and how you're going to show up in the playroom, how you're going to make sense of play behaviors, play dynamics, so that it's rooted in a theoretical model. And this is an important part of developing your play therapy skills. So we spend a lot of time for this in Play Therapy Academy. This is why you also want to take the trainings and do all those kinds of things. So being able to understand that children are really working through and developing some of the processes that they're developing a theory of mind and how they're making sense of things. We're looking developmentally where they are in the playroom. We're looking at what's going on in the playroom. We're using those themes. And it's kind of a window for play therapists to observe how children are working through some of these complex social and emotional issues so that we can support that for their healing process. And one of the things that we know is research even recognizes pretend play and the value of pretend play to explore capacity for theory of mind. I did another live stream episode on pretend play and mentalization. So that's another process. It's kind of similar to theory of mind. They are a little different. There's a few concepts along theory of mind and empathy and mentalization that my takeaway is they share some similar neuroprocessing circuitry. So that is it for today. Let me just do a little recap. So first and foremost, pretend play really allows children that free and protected space where they can work through challenging issues and explore things and make sense of things, try out new skills in the play therapy process in a way that meets their developmental needs. And the thing is, your theoretical model in play therapy is going to dictate how you show up in the playroom and how you help your clients access those therapeutic powers of play. Theory of mind is really the capacity to understand other people's mental states and surmise meaning from those. And it's it's critical in the ability to navigate complex social situations. And we know in the mental health field that people who struggle with theory of mind, they struggle socially and emotionally, and it can create a lot of anxiety for them. And so what does the research say? The research says around the age of 4 or 5 years old, children begin to understand that others may have different beliefs, from them, they may view the same situation differently than them. And that research can use pretend play to even study the capacity of theory of mind in children to see if children actually have the ability to recognize those differences in mental states, even in infancy. And the way that we use this, our practical use for this in play therapy, is really understanding developmentally where children are in their development. How are you seeing things show up in the play therapy room, and how are you making sense of that? And what can it tell you about theory of mind and what children are doing to work through some of those developmental tasks, neurobiology and those kinds of things, that neural circuitry and developing those capacities and where they are in the play therapy process. So that is it for today. If you're interested, I do have Play Therapy Academy is an online supervision and consultation program. We have 2 group consultation meetings every month. And in those group consultation meetings, we have 2 people that present cases. So you not only have my 30 plus years of experience in mental health and even more working with children and adolescents and different developmental stages and issues that they have going on, you have the brilliance of the others in the group. So that we actually have these really powerful groups. I have a Saturday group and a Wednesday group. I do have openings in these groups. There are some other benefits, like in Play Therapy Academy, there are some courses, foundational courses that you can take. They're self-paced. We have a group chat where we kind of provide more support. There's some other things. If you're interested in that, then you can pop over to my website and schedule a video call, a free 30-minute video call with me to see how Play Therapy Academy can be helpful to you. Definitely want to schedule that if you're interested. You can pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. It'll be on the supervision page. So it's Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training. The website is rhplaytherapytraining.com. If you're interested, I do have some other courses online as well. There's some online self-paced courses that teach some of these foundational skills. Like I have Getting Grounded in Play Therapy Foundations, really understanding play therapy and what sets play therapy apart from other treatment modalities. Getting Grounded in Play Therapy Case Conceptualization. So really doing that assessment process at the beginning, knowing what questions to ask, why to ask these questions, and then walks you step by step through the case conceptualization process so you can hone in on what specifically is the problem underneath the behavior. So then that you want to, and why is it happening? What are the patterns? Because then you use that information with a cultural lens. So it walks through that cultural formulation process as well to really recognize and target what's going on and use that for your treatment planning process. So the next course I have coming out is going to be in July. That course is going to be Getting Grounded in Play Therapy Treatment Planning. So how do you take that information? Treatment planning is more than just writing a treatment plan. It's how you formulate the plan in collaboration with your clients and their parents to make sure you have like a roadmap that's going to help you navigate the change process and facilitate that change process. How do you recognize progress? How do you recognize progress in play therapy, right? So it's going to talk a little bit about that. I have some other courses on there, some online self-paced courses. I also am going to have some live webinars coming up. My Santre training that I have, an in-person Santre training coming up in July. That one is full. I'll probably do another one again, maybe in the winter, probably. But I have some other live webinars. So pop over there. There's some free resources over there. Check out what I have going on, how I can help you in your play therapy development and becoming a play therapist, and supporting if you're already a registered play therapist, how I can support you in that as well. All righty. I will see you next time. Bye.